Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming back again. This is Ken Shoulders number 57. And today we're going to go through a free energy paper that was actually written by David Wilcock and go through a little bit more of my connection with David Wilcock and Stabati Aerospace and that type of thing. So for the beginning here, Brandon, let's, before we get Chip to start reading, we'll jump in and we'll watch this little short clip YouTube that I made. It's on my channel. And it's David Wilcock talking about some really cool stuff. You guys are probably going to like this one, so.
So, Chris came out here, we shot the disclosure. There's some really, really amazing stuff in there that covers so many different topics, including all the material about exotic metamaterials, quasi-crystals, sacred geometry inside microscopic molecules, what happens when you have those things, which could be called microclusters, for example. They repel charge from going inside. They have incredible durability. And it turns out that with certain types of quasi-crystals, if you electrify them, you get anti-gravity. The shape of the material causes little orbs of charge clusters to come off, just like Dr. Shoulders discovered. So there are certain materials that will create levitation just by electrifying them. And that apparently is one of the technologies that was on some of the stealth designs. And this is one of the technologies that was leaked to Art Bell and was called Art's Parts, where he describes a compound that has bismuth in it. That's one of the key alloys. And if you electrify this bismuth alloy, it starts levitating. Well, that's true. It works because the bismuth shoots out charge clusters as it gets energized. The sacred geometry creates the needle points that you need to roll off and create charge clusters, and that's what nature does. So there's some really cool stuff you can do with exotic metamaterials. And that's one of the really exciting things about aerospace is how the big money that's being spent on developing new stealth coatings and new radar evasion technologies and hypersonic technologies, all this kind of stuff, as that technology gets developed, it has incredible consumer spin-offs, which include power plants. So one of the things that we're hoping to do, and I'm going to take a drink of water, I'm very thirsty. You want to see your comments again here? Here they are. It's always moving. No lithium. Don't worry, we're not going to use lithium if we can avoid it. There's power plant technologies that are very amazing. They're safe. They're easy to use. So what we're planning on doing, hopefully, is having a device that creates, let's say, 50 kilowatts, which is more than enough to run your house, and it costs $5,000. And one of the things that we're looking at possibly doing, I don't know which one we're going to do, but one of them is the thorium reactor. And if we use thorium, believe it or not, I guess it was World Book Encyclopedia in 1956, all these agents went around the country and ripped out the T page on thorium because it was discovered that you can make energy with thorium without radioactivity, basically cold fusion. And it works a lot better than the Pons and Fleischmann method, by the way. The thorium reactor, we would have to create a thorium fuel, which currently involves the use of high-energy particle accelerators. We would have to redesign that system to be able to do it in bulk. But that fuel could become very inexpensive if we designed it in bulk. And then in that case, if you have a thorium design, there's no radiation, it's totally safe. If it breaks open, you're not in any danger, and you only put fuel in it once a year, and the fuel is non-toxic. The reaction does not create radiation, but it does create energy. So the thorium reactor we might do, but there are other ones that wouldn't even require fuel. They just run. And there's magnetic designs. There's all kinds of interesting things. And so part of what my job is going to be in the company is to figure out which of these technologies is the most environmentally friendly, isn't going to create toxic runoff, isn't going to do damage to you if it's turned on. There are some types of energy devices that create adverse health effects, which we certainly do not want. And so either way, the goal is to get it down to about $5,000, where once you've made this investment, your house just runs. It's similar to having solar panels, except that you don't have to worry about the sun running out of energy. or that there's clouds or snow or anything like that. In this case, there would probably also be a great number of jobs created for the utility companies as they begin working to transition us from wired power to in-home installations. So there's going to be an enormous, enormous job market for in-home installations to get the $5,000 50 kilowatt device hooked up to your circuit breaker so that your house is now being powered. But I want you to think about this. You have become financially independent. Once you have that device, once it's paid off, you don't have to ever pay an energy bill again. You don't ever have to worry about running out of money getting the lights turned off. So that's incredible to have that freedom where your cost of living is going to go down so much, because something like 75 to 80% of the money that we spend is on heating and cooling and various fuels. And that would include gas money for driving. That would include air conditioning and heat in the winter. So if you can heat your home, if you can cool your home, and you're not paying for it, that puts like 80% of the money that you earn back in your pocket. And that gives you freedom where you can start saving money. And then when we have the hover car technology, the technology, we know it works. It's already been done in the inside world. And the Navy declassified this specifically to save our nation, hence Salvator Pius, savior of our nation. This looked like low-hanging fruit to me. I said, let's build this patent. So there may be aspects of the Salvator Pius patent that we use. Now, the hover car is also a very fascinating topic because there are some technologies that most people don't know about that are going to go into its construction. For example, if you look at volcanic glass, that type of material is known as basalt, and there's basalt everywhere. It turns out that because basalt is something that directly crystallized out of a very intensely heated molten material, that when you mess around with basalt, you can get quasi-crystals. You can get the same type of exotic matter physics that I was talking about with the bismuth, the arts parts, where if you electrify arts parts, they lift up off the table. Well, that's one of the things you can do with these composites that are made from volcanic basalt. They also are the secret to developing the type of materials that you've heard about in crashed UFOs, where the material cannot be cut, it cannot be bent, it cannot be burned, but it is very, very lightweight. That's the secret. Because it was already molten in the volcano, you can make it into a quasi-crystalline lattice where it has incredible hardness and is very, very lightweight. So apparently the manufacturing technology that we're going to start using for the hover car is that we're going to print them, 3D print them out of volcanic basalt, which is cheap. So the materials are cheap. It's going to require new machines, new tooling. They've already done it before, believe me. But we're going to be doing it openly. And so our original plan with Stavati was that we acquire this facility in Niagara Falls, maybe another facility in the area, and we go into manufacturing and we create a new city in Wheatfield Business Park, which is immediately north of where the plant is, that we actually create, roads and septic and electric, and we create housing. And we have different types of housing for different types of budgets, and we're going to have high-end jobs that pay well.
Yeah. So now we'll get Chip to start reading some of the stuff, but that was David Wilcock, the Director of Advanced Technology at Stavati. And before he was the Director of Advanced Technology at Stavati Aerospace, because now he's got a security clearance, he can't do this anymore, but he used to text me. And that's how initially he got in contact with me, and we did the theory of anti-gravity back in October 30th of 2021. So yeah, if you want to bring those back up again there, Brendan, we'll get Chip to start.
Real quick question.
Sure.
On what David was saying, I guess, what is he going to do? Pulverize the basalt? and create a casing. He's going to 3D print it from, there's a ferromagnesian silicate, volcanic material. Obsidian is not part of that family, by the way. Basalt is very different. Um, it is volcanic. It has natural vacuities in it due to the gas expansion and everything else when the lava flows come near
Hmm.
the surface. But I don't understand the framework. He may destroy the framework that is makes it unique. And
Well,
so by pulverizing it, he's got to do it. The 3D printer has to have raw materials to work with. It's
I,
not plastic, but so
I,
there's some gaps in what he said there. I'd like to
I,
follow up
I
with him
well,
sometime.
I think, like he said, they've already done this in classified programs,
And they're
so
not
they,
going to be able to talk about it yet.
yeah, so
So,
they know it
all right.
works. I know quite a bit about it. It has a lot to do with spraying materials with DED machines, directed energy deposition machines that basically laser weld, essentially, right? Yeah, there's much more to be talked about there, but yeah, yeah.
All right. So it's kind of a generic description saying 3D printing. I could see where it's a little misleading, but yeah, it's classified.
Yeah. So this was October 3rd of 2021. This is just a little bit before I had the Zoom call with David Wilcock. But if you don't mind reading through some of the stuff here, and then we'll get into the actual reading.
Okay. So Sunday, October 3rd, don't know the date. Interesting. From Wilcock. Hey, fledgling, I'm going live at 3 p.m. PT Pacific time on YouTube. And this is to you, correct, Ed?
Yeah, this is a direct text to me. Yeah.
Okay. You're not going to want to miss this one. I'm dropping mind-bending positive prophecies and discussing the evidence that points to the imminence of levitation. Be there or stay on the ground.
He's actually
Hello,
pretty funny.
yeah, Freakazoid, and this is your reply. It's Dave. Oh, it's
No,
David.
it's David. This is all David.
Yeah, all right. Thanks for joining our Q&A, Ed Kabarski. See you Thursday. Hi, Ed Kabarski. David here. This is just a reminder of Q&A tomorrow at 5 p.m. All right.
Okay.
So then there was a few texts from him, and then I got this one basically the day before it happened, and that this actually happened October 30th of 2021 when I had this Zoom call with David Wilcock, and he described a lot of the stuff that you just heard him say about Stavati and the hover car and some of the technologies and all that type of thing. And this was actually the very first Zoom call in my life. In fact, the night before, David sent me the link, and I had to ask my brother what to do and how to get the app in my phone and make it all work, sort of thing. So, but since he's the director of advanced technology now with the security clearance, he doesn't text me anymore. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because,
that's yeah,
because
not,
David Walker has a security clearance now. Is that right? So it's certain things he can't talk about. Is that right?
yeah, exactly. He's the director of advanced technology at Stavati Aerospace, and in October of 2020, I believe, a year before this, is when he got his security clearance. So I've got a lot of information from David Wilcock and from Chris that we've been going through basically, right? So this is kind of where it all started.
So that's a governmental security clearance, correct?
Yep,
Involved with a private corporation. Obviously, the
yep.
government is well aware of Stavati. All
Oh
right.
yeah, big time. Yeah,
All right. Hi, Ed. We're here. We're on just a few minutes as a Zoom link.
yeah,
Gratitude and light, David. Subscription management. Let's go to the next one.
yeah.
Oh, it's a PDF.
Yeah, so here and so this is kind of interesting. I've had this printed out since 2015, and it's by David Wilcock, and it's got to do with consciousness and a bunch of stuff. And we're really going to get into some cool stuff about time space, stuff that I talk about in here. So I'll point it out as we move along. But this is a section I didn't. It's 19 pages, so we didn't do the whole thing here. But the most important stuff we're about to go through.
Hmm. This is from the Tim Stosa website, sounds like, or Tim Stos website titled Ether, Electromagnetism, and Free Energy by David Wilcott. Subtitle, Consciousness. As we look over the theories of ether, we find ourselves confronted with a direct spiritual fact. As was said in the Christian Bible, we live in and move through the body of God at all times. We saw the clear evidence that the ether is directly connected to consciousness through findings such as the Baxter effect, the Maharishi effect, and the telekinetic experiments with Nina Kaligna and others. We learned of Professor Schnoll's studies proving a clear causative relationship between planetary movements and atomic processes. And this was extended to consciousness, as well as Cohen's studies of the effect of planetary movements on the financial market movements. That's a new one. All right, highlighted. With the new information that we have about the nature of atomic structure, our conventional scientific views seem to be completely inadequate. The only choice that remains for us at this time is to either resist the new information and refuse to acknowledge it, or make some difficult amendments to our most prized paradigms. And now our scientific ignorance is further exposed with the simple and yet completely new concepts of ether, gravity, inertia, and centrifugal force. Without a doubt, Dr. Bruce De Palma's spinning ball drop, in quotes, experiment simply could not be possible unless an object was capable of storing and releasing etheric electromagnetic energy within its atomic structure and interacting with the force of inertia and gravity as it moves through space. Highlighted, space and matter are fundamentally identical. They simply represent different interchangeable phases of one unified vibrating energy source. With our new realizations about the connection between the same ether, the forces of gravity and inertia, we are truly beginning to see there is no way for science to slice and dice up the universe into a set of impersonal laws. Highlighted. Ultimately, the force of gravity is a tendency for this ultimate break to seek oneness within itself.
Ultimate being to seek oneness in itself.
Yeah, this ultimate being to seek oneness and I've heard that conflation with gravity and consciousness and acceleration and inertia many, many times. This is spot on. And the force of inertia is the natural energetic resistance that we experience as we move through the body of this ultimate being. When all in highlight again, when all is ultimately a unified field of energy, that energy is ultimately conscious. And that energy is ultimately conscious, then we are all part of this vast interconnected oneness. Love, instead of being a vague esoteric concept, becomes simply the tendency for the ether to vibrate in greater harmony with unity. Excuse me. Virtual particles, new subtitle. Any quantum physicist will now tell you that virtual particles have been discovered for all of the fundamental components of the protons, neutrons, and electrons. What virtual means is that they have concluded that even though these particles appear to be precisely the same as normal atomic, on the next page, appear to be the same as normal atomic concepts, they are not connected to any atom, and they wink into and out of existence in a very short period of time, very short periods of time. Even though this is highly unusual discovery, they continue to see this simply as a function of particles.
And I'll just jump in there a little bit, Chip, because that winking in and out is actually the Turing wave, going from time-space to space-time and then back to time-space again. So a virtual particle is basically a particle that is in time-space and then goes into space-time and then pops back out into space or time-space again and oscillates back and forth. And that's exactly what the Turing wave is.
Yeah, hence the adjective virtual.
Yep.
All right. They continue simply as a function of particles. We have a big bang where nothing exploded to become something. And now we have all these particles scattered about to form the universe, slowly running themselves down into heat death, extinction, through the law of entropy, which states that everything must die, all order must dissolve into disorder. There's more than a few falsehoods in that statement. All right. But now, when you introduce virtual particles in the mix, we also have to see particles that are appearing and disappearing moment by moment. Where do such particles exist when they're not a part of our three-dimensional universe? Would this not be the reverse of entropy? This is certainly not a popular question to ask in the mainstream scientific world, which continues to humanize the universe with all our own issues. Yeah, entropy underlies everything in physics. That's why it's so disastrous. I mean, try to uproot it. Since the destruction of Earth has become poignantly visible over the last century, it was natural for scientists to assert that the whole universe is also slipping into an inexorable decay. Fundamentally, it is a model without a supreme being of any kind. We are all stardust from a giant explosion that is now fizzling out like a spent bottle rocket. So, how did the idea of virtual particles get established? We know that one of the two ways that we measure the quantum realm is with magnetic particle tracking, period. An excited burst of energy is entered into a chamber filled with a medium, such as fluid or smoke, that is illuminated. And the medium in the chamber allows the observer to see the track the energy makes as it travels. By introducing a magnetic field in the area that is being measured, the energy will naturally travel in a curve. Since we have long known that magnetic fields are always rotating and interacting with quantum energies. Okay. Next paragraph. Based on the observation of the different kinds of tracks and how they behave, a series of rules have been applied to allow these spiraling tracks to be interpreted as representing protons, neutrons, electrons, quarks, all in quotes, or otherwise. So far, so good, it would appear. As the quantum physicists studied these tracks in closer detail, they realized that the tracks were not simply moving in smooth curving lines. Very minor movements were occurring that caused the tracks to slightly bump back and forth as they moved. When they analyzed the areas where the bumps occurred, they found that these bumps followed the same rules that they applied for particles: protons, neutrons, electrons, etc. And now we have a problem: these bumps only occurred for very brief moments of time, even though they were happening constantly. So their model interpreted these movements as the behavior of particles, in quotes, but their effects were only visible for extremely short periods of time. They concluded that these were virtual particles, in quotes. In other words, they still insist that we must have particles. Only now these particles are appearing and disappearing in our existence on a constant basis. So in the mind of the modern quantum physicist, you could be studying empty space, have a proton suddenly show up, and a few nanoseconds later, it will disappear again. And these are not mere random oddities. Either in highlighted, we are talking about something that is happening constantly, everywhere we look, with an almost feverish intensity. It's definitely strange and has certainly created even more problems for the contemporary quantum physicists to work with based on the models that are now in place. You still believe that there are particles in the universe, then how do you explain a sea of particles that can simply be there 1 minute and gone in the next, or in a nanosecond? If the universe is simply composed of dead, empty space, then where did these particles come from? Dr. Hal Puthoff, highlighted, explains that this bizarre behavior is due to the nature of the ether, or virtual particle flux itself. The so-called particles are indeed emerging from the energy of the vacuum.
Yeah, they're coming from time-space.
In a very simplified model of the ether as a fluid, virtual particles could be seen as being created from a fluid-type medium like water. whereas an electron, proton, or neutron may be seen as a stable, spherical, donut-shaped whirlpool in this floating medium.
Like that.
Highlighted. Yeah, in this flowing medium, a virtual particle would simply represent a whirlpool that came and went very quickly, similar to how the ocean is constantly rolling and frothing at the surface. Highlighted again, and this is the and thus it is this existence of virtual particles that gave birth to the concept of a seething cauldron or a raging sea of energy. Next subcaption, the Casimir force. Discovery of a virtual particle flux helps explain the peculiarities of the Casimir effect. This effect is demonstrated by the following experiment. First, you simply start the Faraday cage, which remember as being an area that is shielded from all conventional energy fields, and you introduce a complete vacuum inside. Then, inside the area, you take two perfectly flat metallic plates and move them very, very close to each other. What do you think would happen? Nothing? We are quick to conclude that the simple experiment shouldn't do anything, since we have examples of flat surfaces touching each other all around us. Why should it be any different if the surfaces are almost microscopically flat and contained in an airless space with no conventional force fields in it? Our intuition would not serve us well when we begin considering the problem, as there is indeed a very real and very powerful effect that takes place. Highlighted, under these circumstances, when the two plates are moved together, they will experience a terrific attraction that seems to pull them together with a tremendous amount of force. This is what is known as the Casimir force, named after the man who discovered it. This experimental effect also revealed that if you actually allow the two plates to completely merge, the force that binds them together is so powerful that you literally have to destroy them to get them back apart. Now think about that for a moment, semicolon. How would one explain a force that could suck two plates together? What would happen if every time you used your car, your shoes got stuck to the pedals and you couldn't get them off? Next paragraph, driving would be a very dangerous proposition, especially if you're using the standard shift. That is a rough analogy of what is happening in this experiment, except that in the car, there is no vacuum of air, and energy in the surfaces of your shoe and the pedal are not flat enough to create the effect. Now, something as simple should have already gotten more attention, but and not be such an obscure tidbit of modern science. Most likely, it is not popular because it is a total anomaly. It's very difficult to understand or explain with our current scientific models. In order for us to truly understand what is occurring, we will take a similar analogy cited by Ross Tessian, who asked us to visualize a suction cup. You ask yourself this question: what makes a suction cup attached to the surface? Most people would answer by saying the cup will stick to the flat surface because it is sucking the material and thus attaching itself like glue. Sounds good, right? However, it is totally the opposite. It is the outside pressure and not suction that is responsible for this. Once you push a suction cup onto a flat surface, the edges will make perfect seal over the surface that does not allow any air to get underneath. Once the seal is firmly established, you still have over 10 pounds per square inch of air pressure that is pushing down from the outside. So it is actually the air pressure that is pushing the cup down, since there is now no air left in the inside to push against the cup in the opposite direction. In zero-point energy theory, it is now believed that Casimir force works in exactly the same way. This force is created when the distance between the plates becomes so narrow that no virtual particles, next page, plates become so narrow that no virtual particles, no virtual etheric energies are able to fit between them. So there's no sucking going on at all. In fact, it is a complete absence of energy that exists between the plates, etheric or otherwise. And so a form of ether vacuum is formed between the two plates, where no ether can flow inside the crack. Then the surrounding virtual particle flux or ether pressure pushes the plates together from the outside, highlighted. All right. In Dr. Pudov's model, this pressure is believed to be caused by virtual particles themselves as they continually emerge from the 0-point energy long enough to exert a constant force upon the plates, thus pushing them together. Either way, it all comes back to a fundamentally etheric design, and no other model seems to adequately explain why this incredibly powerful Casimir effect would occur. Bearing this in mind, we are continuing to see the background etheric energy, how the background etheric energy plays a role in the world that we observe. Casimir effect reveals to us exactly how much pressure the ether is truly exerting on us. And And yet, since Dr. Pudov and most other theorists believe that it always cancels out to zero, we can never detect any major changes in the world around us. Just like the fishes in the sea, we end up saying water, what water? Indeed, think about this. Do you ever stop and consider the fact the atmosphere is putting 10 pounds of pressure on every 10 pounds of pressure on every square inch of your body all the time? The pressures of the ether would be far greater. But normally speaking, they are undetectable. The force of inertia is only a vague reminder of how much pressure truly exists when we consider the amount of energetic activity that is occurring at the quantum level. So where do you find all this tremendous etheric pressure if it truly exists? Do we need to play around with metal plates and subatomic particles to see it? Or do we have more familiar examples? As we continue to look at all aspects of etheric science, magnetism ends up becoming one of the most interesting properties of all. In contemporary theory, it is always fused together with electrostatic force that creates electricity. But we can demonstrate that it is clearly a very different animal. And we see that it has a very straightforward and yet undiscovered geometric identity. That one should have been highlighted. Yeah. Undiscovered geometric identity.
Mhm.
All right. So here we will cover the properties of magnetism as ultimately they can be very important to understanding the reality of the conscious ether and how it functions in our universe. If we want to understand this ultimate being, we must look at how our scientific findings, at what our scientific findings have taught us, and assimilate that new information into our design. It is very simple for us to hear certain terms that have been defined scientifically and automatically separate them from any conceptualization of God. But if God truly exists, then all aspects of the universe must be a part of this being. All aspects of our universe must be a part of this being. Panpsychism. Federico Fagin. All right, magnetism and electricity. Next subtopic, going to the next page. See a flex field with a bar magnet, north-south polarized. See a horseshoe magnet, same thing, north-south polarization. This diagram and others culled from Rockwell International's Reliance Electric website. All right. All of our conventional theories about magnetism and electricity did have their origin in etheric models. Since much of the research was done in the 1800s when these models were still in vogue. The flux lines formed by the force from a magnet, which we discussed below, were once believed to actually represent a physical substance that could be cut and harnessed. Even though the etheric models could suggest that the magnets were drawing energy from the ether itself, the original physicists still believed the force created by a magnet existed within the magnet itself, not as a force that was being pulled from the surrounding energy of empty space. This viewpoint has not changed in all the time since it was formulated. However, we will suggest that it must be in error, and the etheric model provides us with a perfect alternative. Highlighted in an experiment with psychokinesis, both electricity and magnetism could be created and controlled by nothing more than the focus of consciousness. And if the consciousness of the others in the room was predominantly negative, the effect was much more draining on the subject. What was the takeaway there? Furthermore, the energy surrounding Nina Kalagina's body would lose half of its strength when she performed these feats, certainly suggesting that she is somehow able to draw in the etheric energy from around her and use her body to send and transmute it to the object. So if the energy of magnetism can be created from sheer conscious thought alone, it would be difficult to ascribe it to a force that simply exists within the magnet itself. Highlighted, magnetism can be created just like gravity and electricity straight from the consciousness of this ultimate being itself. In the case of Kulagina, it occurs spontaneously around the object in question, with no measurable line of force connecting it to the person inducing the activity. Occurs spontaneously around the object in question. Okay. Literally arises from the ethers at the point where it is needed. Intent. E field and B field. Magnetism and electricity are considered to be two components of the same force, namely electromagnetism. Highlighted, magnetism is referred to as the B field, and electricity as the E field. Going to the next page. B is the mag field, E is the electric field, and they are crafted out as a unified wave where the E field is on the horizontal plane and the B field is orthogonal at 90 degrees of rotation away from its counterpart. This is based on a careful measurements of the properties of the fields themselves and considered to be a contemporary fact. The picture below shows us a conventionalized diagram of electromagnetic waveform. Let's see, ultra-high frequency radio engineering publication by W.L. Emery. And we see the orthogonality associated with the two fields. And a sinusoidal wave pattern. Okay, very good.
Right, so have you done that bit? Okay.
There's a little more there. Yeah.
Yeah.
This diagram allows us to clearly see the observed interplay between the two forces. As we look at the picture, we see the two lines are in a constant 90-degree relationship to each other. This is called an orthogonal relationship, and it will become very important when we start looking at the theories surrounding the idea of higher dimensions of space. Since the electromagnetic field wave forms the basis of our universe, let's repeat that. Since the electromagnetic field forms the basis of our universe, in highlight, all theorists who study the concept of higher dimensions believe that each higher dimension must somehow be located at another 90-degree turn away from the three main axes of length, width, and height that we now see. If this sounds confusing or impossible to you, then you're on the right track. No matter where you turn a corner and rotate 90 degrees, you're still going to end up in what we would call three space, cube space. This puzzling conclusion of the existence of higher dimensions has come from the crystal ball of mathematics. Certain equations demonstrate that there must somehow be a way for energy to have more room to travel through than what we see in our own three space. However, this doesn't make it any easier to visualize. Mathematics can often be used to propose solutions to problems without giving us a solid visual model to work with. When we start looking at Rod Johnson's model in chapter 18, we will see that there's a very good reason for the shape of this waveform. It ultimately reveals a hidden geometry inside of itself. And this geometry is independently discovered by James Clerk himself, Maxwell, in the 19th century, and again by Buckminster Fuller, who announced it to the world in his Planet Planning Address, 1969. I missed that one. Johnson was unfamiliar with these earlier discoveries when he independently determined that the same geometric form was being described by the electromagnetic wave. This unseen geometric structure will prove to be a crucial part of truly understanding how the consciousness of this ultimate being forms all of reality that we know from its own body, in quotes. Subtitle: Dynamic Force, Static Energy. Let us not forget how important this wave really is. It is the primary means through which, next page.
Okay, that's it. That's fine. That's
That,
finished.
yeah,
Okay.
it was 19 pages, so I kind of had to stop it at some point there, basically. But um, interesting that it's written by David Wilcock, and I printed it off in 2015, I think it was, but I'm not sure when it was written. It could have been much earlier than that as well, too. So, does anybody have any comments or anything before we shut the recording off?
I do.
Yeah.
Uh, well, what's interesting that what he said at the beginning became apparent. I don't think David had is familiar with my original book, Tapping to Zero Point Energy, because I've been repeating in every presentation. Can I share my screen? Share.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Have you ever met or talked with him, Moray?
I haven't talked with him. I love this book.
Yes.
And so this what I'm showing is I practically show this on every presentation I give because only half the audience typically has heard about zero point energy or vacuum energy. So to me, this I have to keep repeating these points. And this was at the very beginning when I just discovered it back in the mid 70s, just in the literature, mainly from John Wheeler's Geometrodynamics
Hmm.
and interacting with the physicist. And here's you can see the whole thing was the basis of the uncertainty principle and pair production, and everything I was presenting came from the standard literature, the physical review. Boyer was the lead zero point energy physicist in the mid 70s when I got started,
Hmm.
and then Puthoff became the lead later in the 80s. He kind
Yep.
of became Boyer was kind of going into retirement, so you'll see his name on some of the things where he can explain the hydrogen atom. Boyer said you can explain all your quantum effects from the interaction with the zero point energy, and then the famous paper 93 justified it can be an energy source, uh, um, and the source of gravity as well as the source of inertia, which gives you the flying saucer propulsion ideas. And so that paper got a lot of traction. But
Yep.
the actual discovery or derivation, I would say, came from John Wheeler's geometrodynamics. That gave rise to the quantum foam turbulence, where the
Yep.
energy actually enters and leaves our 3D space through these mini holes at the Planck length down at 10 to the minus 33rd centimeters. And so the objection the physics professors had when I was asking, well, can we tap this as an energy source? They said, well, no, this is turbulence. This is chaos. Random things must forever remain random. And that was my question. And I said, wow, I'm kind of stuck. This was, he said, everything decays to entropy, the very thing. And then system self-organization was discovered. In 1977, a Nobel Prize was given to Ilya Prigogine for discovering that a system can evolve from chaos to self-organization. It can
Yep.
actually evolve the other way. And so that opened up the possibility of tapping into the source without violating physics anymore. He won the Nobel Prize for this, and the system has to be in chem. And yeah, it was a systems theory uh, derivation of his work. Applies to any systems that have these characteristics. And the Nobel Prize was given in chemistry because the experiment was in chemistry. Where and I recall.
Was he implying neg entropy at any point, or was
It's
it
actually yes,
discussed?
it's literally that. It's
Yes.
self-organization.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And it's non-linear. That's really important too.
Yeah, in fact, you had to have it. So under certain
Yep.
conditions, self-organization occurs. And And these are the conditions on any system. And darn if the zero point energy has it's highly nonlinear. It's the model of the ether is now like a turbulent plasma, a
Mm,
charged plasma as opposed to a fluid. So it's a more dynamic ether, turbulent plasma. You have to be nonlinear. You have to have it driven far from equilibrium or abruptly put far from equilibrium. It
yeah.
has to be maintained by a flux, like a flow of a river maintains a whirlpool. And basically, this derivation that the zero point energy flux comes from a higher dimensional space was John Wheeler's geometric dynamics. And when I learned this, I was shocked. Why didn't the physicists knew nothing about this? I'm sorry,
Mhm.
not the physicists. The engineers knew nothing about it. They thought empty space was empty. And I said, this is highly dynamic
Mhm.
model coming from John Wheeler. So if and this flatland slot represents the three-dimensional space that's our normal. And
Okay.
you represent it by two 2D diagrams because we can't picture up in 4 dimensions. So we
Yeah.
pretend we're flatlanders. So as the flux comes through orthogonally in an incoherent fashion, that's the background turbulence of the zero point energy, the quantum foam that Wheeler caused it. If there's a tilt to it as it comes through, there is a bit of it aligns in the flatland slot. We call that a polarized vacuum. And this is just from the standard physics.
Yeah.
And if there's vorticity as it comes through, these ideas are kicked around. Oh, these start to form up as the elementary particles.
Yeah.
And so this was basically the fundamental idea. So it allowed uh, you just follow Prigoghine's principles to allow how do you cohere the zero point energy so you can tap it as a source. You have to work with a highly nonlinear system like a turbulent plasma, abruptly drive it far from equilibrium. That's where the abrupt pulsing
Yeah.
and then you maximize the interaction with the zero point energy by using those particles that interact with it more. And that's basically the ions. And if you can
Yeah.
make vortex forms with the ions, you're really cohering it. And
Yeah.
this came straight out of textbook of quantum electrodynamics.
Mhm.
And normally, electrons themselves are more like in thermodynamic equilibrium with the zero point energy in a normal everyday circuit. So the electron is described as a smeared cloud as conduction occurs in the conduction band of the metals, and that's your normal electricity. So you wouldn't expect a very big interaction at all with the zero point energy. But they described heavy particles, the nuclei, have
Mm.
steep lines of vacuum polarization
Mhm.
that are converging on the particles, and then these create the self-organization because now they can influence as you move or jerk the heavy ions or the heavy particles. You start to create a self-organization in the zero point energy. They see it in the experiments. Called it was all in the physics literature. Exotic coherent vacuum states in quantum electrodynamics.
Yeah.
You, in the experiments, they see it in the plasma ion acoustic mode, where the ions are down in the kilohertz band are oscillating back and forth because they're heavy. That's why the frequency is down at the acoustic band. That's where the word acoustic comes from,
Yeah.
is because their frequencies were down there. And And so basically, the ion acoustic activity triggers plasma self-organization. They see it in the experiments. Large radiant energy absorption, high frequency spikes, runaway electron, anomalous heating, all in the experiments. And we come to, and the form of self-organization is the vortex ring.
And there it is. Yeah.
And the vortex ring form, and of course, that takes us right to Ken's shoulders and studying these
Yeah.
at the microscopic level. At so
This
there
looks,
was
sorry,
basically
this looks very good.
allowed.
Sorry, I was just
This
going to
was
say this looks very good, very good. This looks very, very interesting.
yeah. This
I might even watch
so this was basically these points were in my 1978 paper. Before I discovered work of Ken Shoulders, which I don't think I discovered until 92, 93 after the patent came out.
Oh, okay.
But I did uh, propose back in 78 that the ball lightning form would be an example of it, of a coherence.
Bingo.
And that
Got it.
was the kind of like the revelation everybody else was having. I called it donuts on the brain. Everybody had the
Yeah.
vortex ring form as inspired at the time. And so
Very cool.
so basically, and this is where it ties to what you were saying. The critical diagram is back on this one. What's going on? Why do these things appear and disappear? Well, a higher dimensional model, and this was Wheeler's model, just added one extra dimension, and then was able to describe the model. And with one extra dimension, you have basically an infinite number of parallel universes available, et cetera. All those ideas come to life. And then can there be extra dimensionality beyond that? Well, of course there could, but you only needed one extra to make the model of the 0-point energy coherence.
Which is kind of like time space, if you think about it, right? That's that extra dimension.
Well, and then goes further, 3 dimensions of time, and then you can
One particle.
you can keep adding dimensions, right, on any model. But all this could come out of just one extra dimension. In all the work, and under credit was John Wheeler, and people didn't like that quantum foam model, because it is too complicated. That was the objection. How do I predict self-organization? You have all this activity down at the Planck length, 10 to the minus 33rd, and an elementary particle. The virtual particles are 20 orders of magnitude higher down at the Fermi level, 10 to the minus 15, right? And so you're asking, does self-organization occur? Well, you cannot model that by simple single particle models, right? There are just too many participating, right? And so
the thing too, Maury, is that the etherons at 10 to the minus 65th are actually the ones that are oscillating between time space and space time and bringing the information back and forth, if you think about it. And they're all this torus structure. They're all exactly the same structure, essentially, right? Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, we're
from subquantum kinetics.
We're right. But here we're just getting started. This work, I believe Wheeler derived it in the 50s.
54 was the original paper.
Well, that was Turing's, right?
No, I've got a Wheeler paper that was in 54 that I got from Stavati.
Was he doing geometric dynamics?
Yeah, it was the very beginning of it. Yeah.
I'd be interested in that paper, because I think the earliest I found was 57 in the Physical Review. And, well, good. Well, thanks.
We can look it up if you like.
I've got it. I'll find it with Stavati. I've got it in some of my slides with Stavati.
Yeah, if it's especially if it's a PhysRev article link, so you can get it off.
When was Wheeler born? Review. When was Wheeler born?
John
27,
Wheeler.
Something like that. 27.
1907.
07. Yeah, it was a 7. I knew that.
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of 7s in here. A quick question here for Murray and Ed both. It would seem like Ilya Prigogine ends up getting a Nobel Prize in chemistry, and there weren't any physicists in the room at the time he's presenting his work, because he is directly flying in the face of the second law of thermodynamics.
Definitely. Yeah.
I would think every physicist would be shitting and pissing all over themselves, but they clearly knew by that time how important entropy was to our basic model of classical physics.
Yeah.
And then we get told by folks like Jen Honoridian, the Palladians, that the universe tends to perfection as in negotropic. And so this whole thing is screaming bad physics. And John Wheeler comes along and says, well, I have a foam here. It's full of holes. It creates, with a minor excitation of the quantum vacuum field, it creates a buttload of energy. It is self-assembling. It is self-cohering. It is self-limiting. And
Pair production, right? Pair
Yeah,
production is
yeah,
So
exactly.
John Wheeler was born on the July the 9th, 1911, and he passed away on the 13th of April 2008. I think it was so he was like 97.
So let me.
Anyway,
I was going to build on Chip's point. The science is so siloed. It's ironic that Timothy Boyer was the lead back in zero point energy theorists. So once I proposed the combining these two ideas, is coincidentally one, and I think it was at the psychotronics conference where this was shared to me. So one from the audience, he questioned Boyer. Have you ever heard of self-organization, or Prigogine won the Nobel Prize in '77? I think he posed the question in the early '80s to Timothy Boyer, and Timothy Boyer said, "I never heard of such a thing. Random, chaotic things must forever remain random.
Jesus Christ.
I've never heard of that notion of self-organization." And he says, well, Ilya Prigogine made the point, won the Nobel Prize for it in 1977. And he
As
says,
a chemist.
I've never heard of him, right? I never heard this stuff. So there you go. And then, and on the other side, another member of that person attended the psychotronics conference. He actually ran into Ilya Prigogine, who was giving a talk down, I think, in one of the universities in Texas. And he afterwards he asked him, "What do you think about applying your ideas to the nature of the zero point energy, the quantum vacuum?" And he says, "What are you talking about? The empty space is empty." Did Einstein propose that? He says, "There's nothing there. What are you talking about?" He just dismissed it. So I said, it's really ironic combining these two seminal discoveries in both in the vacuum energy and the nature of it in geometry, and he discovering it in chemistry or systems engineering. So basically, that's what my proposal was in this paper. That was my thesis proposal. I'm combining two discoveries that exist in the standard literature, that you're applying Prigogine's ideas of this energetic flux to lead to self-organization, and you can explain pair production coming in and out of existence, because that hyperdimensional flux is the energy flux to keep a system going into self-organization.
Yeah.
And you have your experiments working with plasmas that we knew the heavy particles or where the energy anomalies were occurring in the plasma experiments. And I said, this is what I want to do for my PhD thesis, was just combining ideas. And the rules of the game was I can only cite standard literature from the standard journals. I said, I'm loaded with stuff. No problem, right? Everything's there. You just got to gather it up, but we have to have a repeating experiment. He said, and that's about when Eyring got that paper, and they came out and interviewed me and invited me to join them in Provo, Utah. So I'm out back in Philadelphia. And they came out and interviewed me, and they said, "Well, how are your ideas being received?" So they got that 78 paper circulated by fax and Xerox. I said, "Well, it's just terrible. Other than the physics professors and engineering professors I'm personally friends with, who acknowledge, the possibilities there. They're kind of excited for me to pursue it. Everybody else is nonsense. Mainly, the majority of everyone in the engineering school never heard of zero point energy, right? And it's just right there in our library. As much as you can get flooded with information, right? And they haven't heard it. And I recall there was a Stanford professor at I think at a conference in the '90s who stood up at the panel discussion that we had for zero point energy ideas and evidence from inventions of free energy machines. And he stood up and he said, "What's this zero point energy thing you're talking about. And so I was on the panel. I said, I'll answer that. And then I explained to him that it's in the literature. It's under the different vacuum energies, quantum electrodynamics. You can read
Yeah.
all about it. And and I said also popular articles on it every year. Scientific American would run an article overviewing the field and things like that. Discover Magazine would have an article
Yeah.
in layman's terms, just explaining what's going on. And he just stood up in the middle of the crowd, right, while he was questioning, posing this question, and his reply was, "I don't read those articles."
Too bad for you, buddy.
I was so tempted. I had to bite my lip to not go, well, excuse me.
Yeah, no, pompous ass. Yeah, it's stunning. Just to follow along with Feynman's logic. Richard Feynman was really good at explaining things in simple terms. And one thing he's always emphasized over the last 100 years is most academicians don't truly understand what the hell it is they're trying to make a living with. They can memorize it.
Yes.
And he was particularly pissed off
Yes.
at medical doctors, and his wife died. His first wife, his girlfriend, I guess. Wife died as a result of a bunch of medical malpractice because they read and memorized. And so few people in the technical professions truly understand what it is that they need to understand. And hence you get a jackass Stanford professor stand up and say, well, I've read all the books. I got postdoc PhDs and everything else. And God damn it. No imagination.
That's the problem.
The guardrails have
There it
been
is.
built. Yeah, the guardrails are built into these people. And some of that is cabal. I will freely admit that.
Well, it's
they've
the
had their
institute.
hand in all this shit
All
forever.
the institutes, right? It
That's
is the
right.
schools. Yeah, there's no
That's
question
right.
about it. Yeah.
And so
Very
as a
cool.
species, it's amazing we made it this far.
Yeah,
Honest to God.
where's the stop sharing button so I can get back
Oh.
to my normal screen?
It's
So-
the same button down there.
It's
Or
just
no, it's right
there.
at the top. Yeah, it's
So
right at the top.
Maury,
Yeah, let me-
this work that you did was brilliant, and you really deserve the Nobel Prize for all of this that you did way back when. For
the
those
irony
that
wasn't. It's everything was from others.
oh, I know, but you put it all together though to show people you're kind of highlighting and showcasing it all. And for those that don't know, 0 point energy, the term 0 point energy was actually coined by Ken Shoulders.
And shoulders, yeah.
Actually, it was Dirac. It was way back.
He was
Was it?
further back? I'll be damned.
Way back at the beginning of quantum electrodynamics.
Okay.
In fact, it was in classical physics that it was first used. It just meant what's the lowest energy state? Like they use a parabolator at the bottom.
Yeah.
And then they discovered, and when quantum electron dynamics was discovered, they discovered the jitter. So 0 point means it's at the lowest energy level, your absence of all heat, all light, all particles. What is the nature of the pure empty space at the 0 point? So it was 0 degrees Kelvin is what it referred to.
Yeah.
And so this was at the foundation or at the original discovery of quantum mechanics originally. So it goes back to Bohr. And Dirac was who derived the virtual particle C of electron-positron creation in turbulence, right? The virtual particle model of quantum electrodynamics. So Dirac was the one who really modeled it with the electron-positron virtual particle pairs. So it goes actually back completely in history. That didn't come from me at all. It came from history. It's starting originally in classical theory. 0 point means at the 0 point of the system in the case of a vacuum. And then the activity was discovered by Dirac as they discovered the uncertainty principle. Something's jittering. In the 0 point, and something's happening in the 0 point, the 1/2 mu frequency, right? All the derivations of 0 point energies so it's coming way back basically in the 30s. where
Yeah.
it came to life as an energy and they started modeling it. And then the renormalization came along because it kept going to infinity, and the rest is history of all their problems seeming to have a contradiction. Will not accept an idea of a higher dimension. That was,
Mm.
although the physicists, the engineers hate that, but the physicists readily throw it in their models. So they're not bashful about using higher dimensions to try to explain things. And then they have to explain, well, why don't we observe it? Why can't we observe the higher dimensions, et cetera? They have to deal with that. But
Yeah.
they're very willing to model with higher dimensions. So they're not bashful. Certainly, Wheeler had this crude derivation, which is incredibly unpopular because there's no way you can make models, point particle calculations at all. It had no way to do calculations working with the individual constituents of the vacuum, which
Yeah.
is a direct particle, right? In the
Yeah.
Maury,
many hole.
Maury, are
And
you
that
a
was
Sag-
this.
Maury,
That
are
was
you a
this.
Sagittarius or a Capricorn?
Me?
Yeah.
What am I?
He's a Virgo.
I'm a Taurus. I'm full of life.
Because it said, when I looked up your date of birth, it couldn't find it. It just said December 1949.
That's not December, right?
December. Taurus is eight.
Yeah, you
Taurus
got me
is
mixed up.
Taurus is April, May. December
I'm
is
April. I'm April is my date. I'm
April.
born
So
in April.
Oh,
it couldn't find your date of birth. It said the nearest lead it found was December 1949. So you're,
Well, you mean just
it
what
can't
Chat
find your date of
GTP?
birth on the internet. It just said the nearest you could
oh.
find was December 1949. So I thought
Is
Hey,
December is
hey
who so
guys.
who are you asking? Is that hallucinating
that
or?
was ChatGPT.
Hey,
Oh, right.
okay.
Trust good old Chat.
So
He
your
never
Taurus. So that
hallucinates.
means April May is Taurus.
Yeah, I was born in April.
Okay.
There you go.
Trust me, I'm
Hey,
not
Yeah.
hallucinating that.
I've heard some people.
hey, hey,
I've heard some people
Brendan,
saying you go on.
we should maybe shut the recording off.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. And happy birthday, Murray.
Hey, well, it's coming
I
up.
found that very.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
found that very I'm going to watch this again. I found it very interesting, with especially when you're talking with the diagrams and their presentation. It
Mhm.
makes it much more
Yeah,
interesting
well,
when you're
grab
talking.
tapping the 0 point energy,
Yep.
and
And also,
pretty well everybody has it. And I also think it's
if you stop your share, I can show your books for Waterstones. I was looking at.
Mm.
I'm trying to stop my share. We're
Yeah, maybe we should just.
I see.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, cool. And Brendan, let's shut the recording off so we can let some of the other people in.
Okay, so there we go. Waterstones, Moray King.
And the one on the left is my original book. I had to self-publish. No publisher would have me, so I had to self-publish it.
Yeah.
And then I was getting case slots, and I think Adventures Unlimited was grabbing cases from me. He said, "This is moving in esoteric bookstores. You know, the regular bookstores don't want it." And so that picture on the left was a poor photograph. The cover didn't look like that. It was just a pure beige cover, and that the cover symbolized that's the flatland slot, and there is the virtually infinite energy coming, orthogonal flux
Yep.
coming through it, and a little bit of jitter is what we can organize comes into the plane. That's what the little arrows represent, and that was the important point from Wheeler, and so everything could be derived from our physics, standard physics, and the biggie. I was stumped until Pringesi won that Nobel Prize. And it was like perfect. I was a systems engineer, getting a PhD in systems engineering, and it was systems engineering thesis that Prigogine did. It was all in systems engineering. All systems that have these characteristics will have available self-organization naturally occurring.
And he was looking at biological systems.
Well,
chemical systems.
Yeah, he used the chemistry system as the example. Zhabotinsky, Belousov, Zhabotinsky, and likewise, Paul LaViolette was right on the same page with this,
Yeah,
using that
exactly. The Turing wave.
the Turing wave was Turing in a way was the first to probe the idea as he was deriving complex nonlinear equations. So
Yeah,
Turing was onto it, onto the basically the same idea that Prigogine won the Nobel Prize in '77. So Turing could be the first to propose it and the first to give an example. In what you shared with me, I was unaware that Alan Turing was into this, right? Because he's famous for the computer science stuff,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so that was a cool find that Turing had enough math that he could start to derive this and via nonlinear differential equations. And of course, Paul jumped right on it, and Paul just learned this, and obviously get credit Turing with the first to
yeah,
make that proposal, the first to make the discovery. And so it's appropriate to honor Turing this way, and because he was involved in the war and cryptography
yeah,
and everything else,
exactly. The Enigma
he
machine. Yeah,
really didn't. You didn't know about what he was working on and what he was thinking,
yeah,
right? It was just very,
He died
very
quite young,
much in the
age
background.
41. At age 41, so it's quite young. He's got
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true genius, and so they put him involved in cryptology, and
So
so
Marty,
everything was just following that pattern all along. That one pattern that I presented in '78, nothing but support from there on. Of course, when I discovered shoulders in '92, boy, did that connect a lot of
It
dots,
gelled. Yeah,
gelled everything to energy machines all over the place. As soon as you're making those EVOs, there's your fundamental clutch. It grabbed energy, and
yeah.
now you're just finding a way to apply it. And it was in Shoulders' patent. He was speculating on all the ways you could harvest that energy.
And that's one of the things that we're going to be doing in the near future here is I split up Ken Shoulder's book, EV: A Tale of Discovery, into 23 sections that we can read through and go through, because there's so much rich information in this book as well. So Brendan, maybe we should shut the recording off
yeah.
now.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and a good week. Cheers. Take care. Bye.